not recording yet. Okay, now I'm recording.
Get on it, Zoey.
I'm keeping that in.
Welcome to Haunted Hospitality, Southern Stories told by Spooky Gingers. I'm Robin.
And I'm Zoey.
And I have a story for you today. Usually you forget it. I forgot it this time.
Yep.
But first, Zoey, how's life?
Well, Robin, it's very hot.
Like, your life?
No,
That's nice.
like outside. It's in the
okay.
100 degrees this summer. Spring, technically, I think, still.
Until, what is it,
The
June
21st? Or 22nd?
It's up for debate. I don't know.
Okay. But
Nobody actually knows.
So my AC has been working on and off this entire week, and right now it's off. But of course it's Saturday. But another more important thing broke this week, and you are aware of this, and that was my cell phone.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were saying, like, this news broke, and I'm like, wait, there's lots of news.
No.
Okay.
No, in my life, my cell phone stopped connecting to data, aka
Yeah.
I couldn't send or receive texts or phone calls. And I was like, that's really weird. So I'm on my mother's plan, and so we had to go to our nearest T-Mobile because they bought out Sprint. And we went to T-Mobile, and so basically my mom had like an iPad line or something. I don't know. She went to delete that iPad line and deleted that iPad line. And I guess in the back systems, they just went ahead and accidentally deleted my phone line too. But that was like a week prior to me losing data.
Okay.
So, like...
So the lesson here is, guys, if you need to cancel your thing to save money, you're going to have data for a week.
Yeah,
It's
I
all
guess.
good.
But, so then they've got me back on. They reimbursed me, or not reimbursed me, but re-put me on her line. And then it still wasn't working, so they had to give me a new SIM card. And I've only had this SIM card for like a month.
Oh, the one that they had to replace. Okay.
Yeah.
So we would like to file a complaint with T-Mobile.
Yes. And you should never have bought out Sprint. I was happy with Sprint.
I'm so sorry this happened to you.
My life is just terrible.
I remember everybody, she messaged me and she was like, in case you've been trying to contact me, my phone is broken. And I'm like, I wasn't, but thank you.
Well, see, when I got everything back online, I was expecting like a rush of phone calls and texts from people trying to reach out to me because I'm insanely popular. And but I know for a fact that my mom had texted me during that time.
Yeah.
And that didn't come through.
Oh, okay.
So any texts or phone calls or anything that had people had tried to reach me, it wouldn't come through. So.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're set.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. How's your life?
Okay, so you put in like I can tell like you put in like effort to thinking about what you're gonna say in the how's life portion. Meanwhile, I am about to enter your apartment, and this is just on the reg, and I'm about to enter your apartment. I'm like, oh shoot, what have I done these past 2 weeks? What has happened to me? I don't know. I'm just gonna think of something on the fly, and my brain is empty right now. So my life update is that I completely forgot about life updates. And you know what? I think that's fine.
That is fine for you.
If you did it, it would be unacceptable, Zoey.
Well, see, if I did it, everybody would be like, oh my god, something genuinely horrible happened in her life that she doesn't want to talk about.
Versus Robin is just weirdly private.
Yes. The difference between a Leo and a Cancer. Come on, Robin.
You know, actually, that it is... the more I hang with you, which, I mean, I've known you for a long time, so in general, just these past 12 years?
12 years,
Almost
okay.
12 years. It has become apparent to me why I'm not a Leo. Because remember, I thought I was a Leo?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and now I'm like, I'm not Zoey. And Zoey is like the quintessential Leo.
Oh, I thank you.
Okay. Do you have a something for us today?
I do have a something for us today. And you know what? I've been going kind of out of my way to try to do something Southerns because I feel like you and I are more interested in the something spookies.
Yeah, sorry, the South. If it helps, we cover literally everything else is something Southern.
Right, yeah. So I'm doing a something spooky Southern.
Oh, yes, those are the best.
Yes, those are the best. And this actually came to me from Kari.
Thanks, Kari.
So Kari told me about the Crybaby Bridge in Anderson, South Carolina. Have you heard of it?
I have heard of crybaby bridges in general. I did not
Okay.
know of one specifically in Anderson.
Okay, so a little content warning for suicide, as there tend to be in ghost stories. But so this bridge in Anderson, South Carolina, so it was the original bridge there was built sometime between 1915 and 1930. And that bridge ended up being moved to Charleston. I don't know why they didn't just like tear it down and then build a new bridge in Charleston. Don't ask me. But that bridge was moved to Charleston, and then in 1953 it was destroyed, but there was a new bridge built when it was moved to Charleston. So this is the second bridge that was built there. But when it was being built in Anderson, there was a man who allegedly, he was a construction worker, and he fell to his death during the construction of the original bridge. And as he fell, he called out the name Maya.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the name of his 13-day-old daughter. And people claim that if you walk on the bridge or by the bridge near sundown, you can hear the word Maya being repeated over and over again. So that was the original bridge that got moved to Charleston. And then when it was in Charleston, people like refused to cross it. Like there was just something wrong about it. So they ended up tearing it down.
Was it like poorly constructed, or was it a spooky reason?
I think it was a spooky reason.
Okay.
Yeah, the website I was on was just like, who knows?
I feel like I would cross a spooky bridge, but I would not cross a poorly constructed bridge. Is my only thing.
Yeah. So the bridge that is currently there in Anderson, South Carolina, people do go on this bridge, even though it's heavily advised that you do not.
Mm-hmm.
There is another bridge built that you can go on now. It used to be when you were able to drive onto the bridge, people would drive their car to the middle of the bridge and they would turn their car off. And they would hear a baby crying. Or a woman will come up to them and knock on their window and scream, "You have my baby! Give me my baby!"
Really?
Yes.
Is this connected to the Maya thing?
So there's a second story that I think is more general to all crybaby bridges.
Okay.
So, just real quick, when you're also walking on the bridge, because you're not allowed to drive on it anymore, when you're walking, people have seen the woman walking up and down the bridge, or they will see a woman with a baby in her arms telling the baby not to cry.
So she got the baby back.
Unless
Maybe.
that was right before what's
Oh,
happening.
shit. Okay, yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, so there's two stories that I was able to find online.
Mm-hmm.
So one is that this woman was pregnant, and she didn't know if the baby was her husband's or her lover's.
That's the question.
Yeah. And when she gave birth to the baby, I don't know if there's like a race thing happening, but when she gave birth to the baby, it was very evident that it was not her husband's baby.
Okay.
So her husband scorned her, her family scorned her. She probably had a lot of things going on in her mind, and she might not be real. So she went out to the bridge and she jumped off while holding the baby in her arms. And both she and the baby died, but when she landed in the water, the baby was pulled from her arms like she lost her grip. And so she's now fated to walk up and down the bridge looking for her baby.
Okay.
Yes. So there's a second story that is worse, even though that's pretty bad.
Yeah. So this is really our third story.
Yeah, kind
Okay.
of. This one is there's a young farm girl who gave birth to a child, no mention of the father, and she shared a small house with her mother. And 2 days after she gave birth, on September 30th, 1954,
Oh, that's a very specific date.
Very
for a folk
specific.
story.
yes. So she gave birth on September 30th, 1954, but just 2 days later, her mother passed away. And on October 30th, the 1 month birthday of the child, she walks out to the bridge, walks to the middle of it, and just throws her baby over the edge.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And so she goes home after that to the house that she shared with her mother, and people don't really hear from her after that. Obviously, I don't think anybody at this point knows that she threw the baby over the bridge, but they went to go check on her a couple weeks later, and she was found hanging from the rafters.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always wonder, because of the date, if that's like
a little bit more accurate.
A little bit more accurate, which is very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know postpartum hormones can cause people to do insane things, unfortunately, especially if you don't have a support system. Yeah. And then the grief of losing your mother then 2 days after giving birth.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I get a very tough situation. I'm wondering, just like bringing it kind of back to like the folklore lens, the idea of the woman on the crybaby bridge specifically reminds me a lot of La Llorona, just because the whole, the woman is at least implicated in the death of a child, and she doesn't seem to be the one crying, but she is, it seems, in distress walking over the bridge and approaching you if you were there.
Yes. Kari said when he heard the story, because Kari grew up close to Anderson, South Carolina, he said that in his circles, he just heard that if you go out there and turn your car off, you'll just hear a baby crying. He never heard anything about the woman when he was growing up. But then again, Kari's not into ghost stuff.
Kari is not into ghost stuff. But it could be that that's the more mainstream version of the story.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Do you have a story for us today?
I do. We are going to talk about someone who has been on our list of things to cover for a while. So we are going to talk about Marie Laveau, who is known as the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans, and we are going to talk about her notoriety. Lord, I know exactly the word I'm trying to say. We're going to talk about her notoriety.
There we go.
And how it is wrapped up in misconceptions around voodoo. And then at the end, we are going to get into a smattering of ghostliness.
Ghostliness.
Yes, so now that I have laid out my lesson plan,
okay,
let's get into it. So, Marie Laveau was called the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. She was quite a mysterious figure, both in her lifetime and afterward. In fact, in her New York Times obituary in 1881, which, yes, she got a very long obituary in the New York Times.
Wow.
They called her, quote, an object of mystery, end quote. And also, the New York Times was just very pro Marie Laveau, or at least that specific writer in that specific obituary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know who Marie Laveau is. I was under the impression that she is a very infamous person in history, and that the fact that I like her was supposed to be like, oh, you don't say that out loud.
So, I think that there has been ups and downs in how people view her.
Okay.
So, I was able to find out a surprising amount about her life, but almost everything that people had, like, against her was just kind of, like, really...
misogynistic?
Either outlandish and very, like, anti-voodoo.
Okay.
Let me think. Like, I didn't find any, like, specific thing, like... There's nothing about her to make her infamous in what I was able to find, other than the fact that people don't like voodoo. Now, this is just what I found. There are books on her. I did, what I could do in terms of research, but I did not, and I consulted, different newspapers at the time and stuff, but I did not read one of the books on her. So there might be a lot more information out there, in which case, guys, hit us up. I would love to do just, an update on it, you know? So, she was born in 1801 on September 10th. She was born in New Orleans. Her father was Charles Laveau. He was a white state legislator of the upper class. And her mother was, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Marguerite d'Arcantel.
Okay.
She was of African descent. In fact, Marguerite's mother, Catherine, was brought over as an enslaved person during the African or the Atlantic slave trade from Africa.
Okay.
And so her mother, Catherine, so Marguerite...
Marguerite's mother.
Yeah, Marguerite's mother, Catherine, was brought over as a slave, but she eventually bought her own freedom, and I think eventually brought Marguerite's freedom, and so Marie was born free.
Okay.
Yes, she was known to be exceptionally beautiful, by the way, and I think from what I've been able to see, that she grew up, I think, with her mom, but it really seems that she had access to maybe her father's sphere of influence.
I see.
Like, because she was basically, it seems from a rather early age, like being surrounded by powerful men who were drawn to her because of her beauty and because of her advice and perhaps what she could, or at least what she was rumored to be able to do for them via her voodoo practice.
Okay.
So she always wore her hair down. The image you will see of Marie Laveau is with her hair kind of up in this headscarf, but actually I'm pretty sure that that's somewhat of an inaccurate image because she had really long curly hair, always wore it down over her shoulders, and she would go into well-to-do houses in the area, and she would be their hairdressers for the young women and the other people in the household. And she was known to be able to heal you. Like, people would have to, like, request her kind of as like the town nurse to an extent. She would go over, she would heal you with her herbs, and just because she had a knowledge of medicine. Mm-hmm. And she would be a midwife. One of the things that she was really able to do is gather information.
Okay.
Because she would, be going on into all these people's houses, and she would develop relationships with their servants and the slaves that worked there, and she would then be able to know more about these people. And then when she is, because they would always go to her for advice, and to be honest with you, it's a little bit confusing for me trying to figure out, just based off of articles, like if we're talking about they wanted her to predict the future or if they were actually like consulting her about things. Because there were guys who would go to her, and like they would be merchants and they would have ships, and they would like be like, hey, is it a good idea to put out this ship right now? And so in that sense, I'm thinking, well, maybe they're thinking she will predict the future, because they wouldn't put out their ship if she said it wasn't a good idea to put out their ship.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or is it that, they're asking for advice, and because she actually knows all the inner workings of all these higher families, she would be very likely to be able to tell you the outcome of what's going to happen.
Right.
And she was often very correct about the advice she would give, whether that was through the lens of, is she predicting the future as people thought, or is she actually working with inside information, because she did have a lot of it.
So would it be fair to say she was having the inside information and then giving this air of, let me see the future? Oh, the future says.
It is so hard to know for sure, just because it was so long ago, and because all the stories about her, you don't know if like this is something that actually happened, or if this is just something people said about her because they're passing on the story of the notorious Marie Laveau.
Right.
But from what we are able to gather, it does seem that at a certain point she realized that she embraced the title of Voodoo Queen.
Okay.
And that did a lot of good things. It was really a brand thing. Not like saying like she didn't actually practice it or anything, but in terms of the way like the upper crust viewed it, it was almost like she had like these like mysterious powers, and when like, I mean, that's good for business with what they're asking her to do. And so she would be like kind of, yes, truly doing, practicing voodoo, but also kind of like, I think in their minds, or to them, playing it up a little bit at the same time. Now, okay, at this point, and I don't exactly know when she starts all this practicing, so we're gonna either start when she's doing this or a little bit further back, just to kind of get the story of her life. When she was a teenager, a lot of people were attracted to her, and there is a little bit of dispute over when she was born exactly. Most likely it's 1801, but the New York Times, when they said she died, they said she was 93, when in really she was like 80. So I think that they're kind of looking at this period when she was single but being, approached by all these powerful men. I think they were thinking that she was sleeping around with them a lot, which was like not... how about this? How do I say this? It was frowned upon by society at that time, but like you could tell that the New York Times was actually impressed with her. Mm-hmm. I mean, at this point, she was a teenager, so I'm not going to say, oh, she was sleeping around with everybody at all. But they just have this quote about her, which I really want to share. She was the creature of that peculiar state of society in which there was no marrying or giving in marriage, yet they were not like the angels in heaven. Which was basically like, she was single and she was having some fun. Which, okay. And the thing is, the reason I'm kind of putting her birth date into that is because the period of time they're talking about, she would have been like 16 or 17, and I don't know if that's like necessarily I don't know, that seems like a weird amount of attention to put to that when I think that they were thinking they're talking about somebody in their 20s.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, she did have a child out of wedlock in 1817, when she would have been about 16 years old. The man she had the child with was named Jacques Perry, I think is his last name. It's spelled Paris, but I guess it's probably pronounced Perry.
Okay.
So they had a child named Felicity.
Oh, I love that name.
Right. It's a good name.
It's such a good name.
Such a good name. He was a cabinet maker. He was biracial, the same as her. And he had come over from Haiti during the Haiti Revolution of the late 1700s and early 1800s. And about 2 years after they had Felicity, they got married in 1819. So at this point, she's 18 years old. They got married in the St. Louis Cathedral. St. Louis. See, this is the thing where, like, you can tell that I took Spanish in high school and college and not French. But they got married in that cathedral, and listen, I don't know who this guy is. I even deleted his name from my notes, but a very important fellow attended the wedding. So at this point, she was an important figure.
And fun fact, Madame Lalaurie also got married in that same cathedral.
She will come up a tiny bit.
Just like Marie came up a tiny bit in the haunted episode.
They come up a tiny bit. Each other's stories. So, like I said, they had Felicity. They got married in 1819. They had another child whose name I did not write down.
It's okay.
In 1820, which was unfortunately the same year that Jacques disappeared. Yes.
Oh, like he just went out for a carton of milk, disappeared, or she's cleaning her knives in the kitchen sink, disappeared.
Well, the thing is, nobody knew for like not a saying. I don't know if people were like speculating at this point that she killed him, though I do think like it comes in to how people view her later. Okay. But like everybody just knew that he disappeared. Okay. And at this point she's like probably like 19, 20, something like that. So she's very young. And when he disappeared, she's kind of stuck in this space of like, am I married? Am I single? Like, because you can't get really a divorce. Y'all had kids. What do you do now? And everybody, like, nobody knew for a long time. But now there is like one person who did some very smart digging and thinks that she found out what happened to Jacques. Okay. So this person is a Louisiana State University PhD student. Her name is Kennetha Harrington. And she like just set out to find what happened to him. And she decided, I'm not even going to look in New Orleans records because I feel like everybody would have started there and they were not able to find anything. So she looked in Baton Rouge records, which is very close by, and she was looking for things about Jacques Perry, and also he had another name, Santiago.
Last name or first name?
Santiago Perry.
Okay.
So she was looking for stuff about him. Now keep in mind, he was a cabinet maker, well, that's honestly kind of it. So she was looking at stuff for him, and she found something for somebody named Saint Yago Perry. So ST period, and then a space, and then YAGO. And if you say
it really fast.
Santiago.
Yeah.
So it is a way of saying it. And also keep in mind, during this time, a lot of written things were not standardized.
Right.
So, like, you could just because we've decided now you spell Santiago SANTIAH. Why did I decide to go down that route? Anyway, it just fits. So she found records of a man named Santiago Perry in Baton Rouge who died in 1823, who was a carpenter. And carpenters and cabinet makers were the same thing.
Gotcha. And you said what date?
1823.
And what date did they get married?
1819. And he disappeared in 1820. And it's saying that, like, she thinks this is the same guy because it's in the same area. He is also a free man of color, which is like what these people are like referred to as a free man of color. And then Marie Laveau was a free woman of color because there was a lot of slavery in New Orleans and everywhere.
Really?
During this time, yes. And so she thinks this has to be him. And you know what? I think it is by far the closest we'll ever get. So I don't know why he left, but it seems that he left. The New York Times obituary, and keep in mind, I don't know how they know what's going on in her life. They were like, she was very happily married during this year. I don't know. Okay. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. But anyway, they separated. Okay. And a little bit later, either a year or a bit more than a year. I don't know. But anyway, I told you, she's kind of in this limbo space. She's like, okay, well, I am very young. I'm very pretty. And she and this guy, whose name I am going to butcher.
Okay.
Captain Christophe Domingue Lapillon.
Okay. Christophe.
He doesn't come up that much.
Okay.
They partner. They live together. They're essentially married. It's just she's in this weird state of not knowing her marital status.
Right.
So they're essentially married, and he is often referred to as her husband, and for all intents and purposes, this is like the key relationship of her life.
Okay.
I don't know why I put it here, but he was an officer in the War of 1815. So now you know that about him. There's not a lot of details on the guys. Honestly, there's way more details on Jacques just because he disappeared and it's a mystery.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the house that she lived in for most of or all of her life, and where she conducted a lot of her business. And it's like a very cool little house. So it's a little red tile house, so like it's like has like red tile on the roof and stuff. It is on St. Anne Street in New Orleans, and I was like, and like the New York Times article or obituary, I think that was where I got this information. It was like it was between these streets, and I was like, I wonder if I can find it. I wonder if you can go. And actually, yeah, you can. So I went onto Google Maps, and I was like St. Anne Street, and then I looked between these two streets, and her house was there, except it was like torn down and then rebuilt in 1905. Okay. So it's a different house, but there is a plaque that says Marie Laveau used to live on this spot.
Okay.
But it was actually, when it was built, and I think for a lot of her life, so before it got more populated and stuff, this was on the outskirts of New Orleans, and actually it was much more similar to a wilderness at that point. So I think it was like maybe her house was one of the only ones there. It was out of this thing called adobe, which is like soil packed together so thickly it forms a solid material. So hers was specifically made from clay and moss.
Okay.
And it was a very unique house. It had small window panes and very like low doors that you have to kind of, I assume you have to kind of like maybe duck down to go into. And there were a lot of old trees on the property that kind of just grew bigger and bigger. And so eventually when all these other houses started getting built in, because during her lifetime and during her time living at the house, New Orleans was growing and more people were moving there. And so all these old buildings kind of started popping up in the neighborhood. But they said it was almost like you're entering a different world when you go into hers, because it had this, when you entered in like the wooden gate to her house, it just had this feeling of having been there for much longer. And actually the New York Times referred to it as, quote, a relic of New Orleans of long ago. Uh-huh. And I found that just so interesting to read because, we're in the year 2022, Zoey, and I'm reading about a thing written in 1881 that is saying that this house, which was built in the 1730s, by the way, was a relic of a New Orleans long ago. And I'm over here thinking, I can't even picture 1881 New Orleans. Right. So, like, we're talking about our long agos, long ago. I don't know. I just got really tripped out about that. And I was like, that's amazing. And I was like, I have to tell Zoey about this house. I can't even tell you. So, like I said, that was kind of her hub. There were some other places she worked too. She worked in Congo Square, which is a place where a lot of enslaved people would gather in New Orleans and engage in their cultures that were like, they had back in Africa here, but like, they were able to all just like kind of participate in it together uninterrupted. And I think she also, there was mentions of being more along the bayou as well in some of her practices too, but her house was really the hub. A lot of people from like different sections of the government would come to see her. People would travel out of state and would stay there. She would feed everybody. They would like kind of stay in that house. And again, it's not a big house. Yeah. And again, everybody's kind of going to her, trying to figure out what they're going to end up doing. And it's not like she just treated or provided these services to the well-to-do. Like I said, whenever anybody had any sort of ailment, they could call her and she would go to them, and she would do it even if like it would be dangerous to her. So like during like cholera and yellow fever epidemics, when like this is a very highly contagious disease, you could very easily just get it and die, she would be going out and helping all these people all of the time.
That's really interesting, because you also mentioned that she was a midwife, and I find it so interesting because during the European witch trials, like the number one person that they usually focused on were midwives.
Well, I mean, okay, she's also been called a witch. I mean...
Well, yeah, no. So I'm saying, like, the fact that she is a midwife and she's this doctor person and she's being called a witch, aka, and the Queen of Vodou, is just... I just found that interesting in my brain. I don't know, like, how to verbalize the tie that I'm seeing there.
Yeah.
But...
Honestly, I don't know how she found the time to do it.
Honestly...
Like, it seems like to me she has, like, 3 different careers.
Yeah.
And she's, like, excelling in all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Self-care. So okay, she's living her life. Here's one thing I was very surprised to find out, and I was really kind of sad to read it. She and her husband owned slaves.
Really?
I was not expecting that.
I was not expecting that either.
She owned at least 7 during her lifetime. I don't know even what to say about it, you know?
Yeah, it's like... my first instinct is to say, well, maybe she treated them better, but then like, immediately I'm like...
You own people.
Yeah. You know?
And, like, that's the excuse given to, like, if you are gonna talk about... Okay, let's say, like, you're on a tour at this, like, plantation house or something where, like, obviously a lot of slaves worked. They're gonna be like, oh, but don't worry, they were, like, really nice to them. And, like, that's the baked-in excuse.
Yeah.
But, like, still you own people.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, just I had to absolutely put that fact in there, as I would do for, like, anybody that we cover.
Right.
So her husband died in June 26th, 1855.
Okay.
So at this point she was...
20-ish years later? So she was 36?
No, she was like 50.
50
okay. Something. She was like 54. They are recorded to have had 15 children. I wouldn't... No. Don't even freak out. Don't even freak out. Don't even freak out. Because I was it seems that was probably recording both their children and their grandchildren, potentially, and great-grandchildren. Well, I don't know if you could even potentially have great-grandchildren at that point. Maybe. I need to do some math. So grandchildren and children, we think. It's probably likely that in her lifetime she had maybe 9 kids, which, okay, again, that's a very lot, but for some reason, just when you get into double figures, like, I black out. I can't even process.
I guess my next question was going to be, is that she had 9 kids, or is it she had 9 kids with that husband in addition to the at least one you talked about with the previous husband?
No. So she had 2 with the previous husband. Mm-hmm. She had 7 with this guy. Here's a really sad thing, actually. Her 2 children that she had with Jacques, both of them disappear from records in the 20s. So they probably died when they were children, young children. And then of her other 7 children, only 2 lived to adulthood.
Okay.
One was named Philomene.
Okay.
Both were daughters. And the other one was named Marie. Actually, all of her children, it was like a tradition at that point, and I think Catholicism potentially, at me if I'm wrong, is like to like name all of your children like Marie in some sense. So like you name them Marie something, and then you kind of call them the something, except in Marie Laveau's case, she was called Marie.
Right.
But so like her children were like Marie Philomene, Marie Heloise kind of thing. So she had Philomene living to adulthood and another child, Marie Laveau II.
Okay.
Yes.
I like that.
me too. And Marie Laveau, just like, let's like give her the second. Let's give her a little bit of a moment here, because she also was a voodoo priestess and conducted a lot of, practices and rituals, public rituals and stuff. And so she was also, we think, a part of, because they share the same name and everything, establishing the notoriety.
Gotcha. Okay.
Of Marie Laveau as the Queen of Vodou.
Kind of like that thing where it's like to make it the immortal pirate, they pass on the name of the pirate to the next person.
I didn't know that was a thing. I like that.
I don't think it's a real world thing. I think it's a literature, like a story thing.
Oh, okay.
But it's like everybody thinks it's an immortal pirate because this guy's legend has been living for 30, 50, 80 years, but he's been youthful and looks the same the whole time. But in reality, it's just been like 4 of them.
I like that a lot. Now, in this case, it wouldn't actually fit because Marie Laveau II, she did live to adulthood, but she did die, I think, in her 30s. She died in 1862. And so it was really more of a thing that they were doing it at the same time versus Marie Laveau kind of taking the reins
from Marie Laveau.
I know who I'm talking about when I say it, but y'all don't know who I'm talking about when I'm saying it.
Was it the first episode that we had? That
yes.
Yes.
4 Raymonds.
Yes.
Raymond the Fourth. That was really hard. And then we've had episodes where it's like everybody's name is like Will. I remember the assassination of that governor. Almost governor/governor guy. That was a contested situation and contributed to his death. William Goebel.
Yes.
There was like 1,000 Williams and then 1,000 of the other names and
Johns.
Johns.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we have a YouTube comment saying, I'm a John too.
Hey, John.
Hi, John.
There's lots of you. Okay, so in about 1860, she started having a lot of illnesses, and she got to a point where she was mostly bedridden. She would still have a lot of visitors seeking her advice, and so she was still doing this, but it was from her home. And in her living room, she surrounded herself with like candles and crucifixes, holy images, and her altar. And so here's like, I think, a good place to bring in the fact that like throughout all this time that she is, you know, practicing voodoo and is the voodoo priestess and stuff, she is also a devout Catholic. Mm-hmm. And she even got more devout in her older age. And so I'm going to get into this a little bit when I get into the sections about the misconceptions of voodoo, but it's not exclusionary. Mm-hmm. You can practice more than one thing at once, and so this was what she did.
But doesn't Catholicism say no witchcraft?
Well, I wouldn't that's the thing. What do you call witchcraft?
Yeah.
Because I think that part of the misconceptions about voodoo is that it's like full of black magic, when really it's not. It's your own way of worshiping, and it's actually very similar to Catholicism. We're not there yet in my lesson plan, but we'll get there. So she died in June 15th, 1881. She had a very widely attended funeral. Like I said, she had an obituary in the New York Times, which is a very big deal.
Yes.
And she was buried in the old St. Louis Cemetery, number 1, in her husband, Captain Glapion's family tomb, at least reportedly. There is a lot of dispute about whether she is actually in that tomb. We'll get to the stories of the cemeteries. But in terms of understanding the popular culture of Marie, the tomb is very important. And so in a lot of people's minds, she is buried there.
Okay.
Whether that's true or not, we don't actually know.
Okay.
And I don't know why we don't know that. I feel like we know enough about her to be able to tell.
Yeah, like to be able to just open the tomb a little bit and be like, Marie, you in there?
Marie, are you in here? So I'm going to go into some unproven stories about her. And, you know, a lot of these, like I said, have to do with misconceptions about what voodoo is. But I'm going to go into them. Okay. So, you know how she was a hairdresser who goes into a lot of well-to-do houses, does their hair as hairdressers tend to do. They were people saying that, oh, she would go in, she would do these young women's hairs, and these young women would talk about their romantic woes. And so then she would give them love potions in order to use upon the objects of their desires. There was also a thing in this one article, and I was kind of confused by the phrasing, but I think it was saying that was a rumor that she would take this like little bag in there that had a lot of like different fine ingredients that were just basically essentially there to like make you feel like you had allergies, like you were sick, and then she would kind of heal you after that.
Okay.
That doesn't seem like legit to me based off of everything else, but it is part of the story. Another part of her story, this is actually really cool. This makes me think of like your traditional like folk myth or something, that there was a hurricane by this lake called Lake Pontchartrain.
Okay.
I know I'm mispronouncing that. And that she had a cabin on the lake. And keep in mind, this is New Orleans. So, like, this is a thing happening here now where it's like hurricanes are coming, everybody evacuates. Some people don't want to evacuate.
And then they see the gray man and...
Yes. Well, she didn't want to evacuate.
Okay.
And so she was in her cabin, and the cabin was, like, literally shaking with the wind.
Oh.
And everybody was like, Marie, get out of here. Marie, get out of here. I don't know how they were, like, getting that information to her right then. Anyway, so she did leave, and the minute she like stepped foot outside of her house, it like, I think they're saying it kind of capsized and went under the water. as soon as she left it. And so then as soon as she was back inside another place, like she was in shelter, the storm immediately stopped.
Huh.
I know. I'm like, was it coming for her? I don't know.
Maybe.
At least in that folktale.
Mm-hmm.
Another story about her, and this is part of like the notoriety aspect of it, it seems that she was kind of eventually used as as an image of like how to get children to behave, as in it would be like, Marie Laveau is gonna get you if you don't do what we're telling you to do, which that always seems to come. And you know what, funny enough, it always seems to be like a woman villain who is like characterized as why you need to behave children in these cases. I never see it really being a man. So you have Hansel and Gretel, which we have not covered, but we all know about, and it's the witch in the woods who's like gonna get you if you go roaming out in the woods. You have Black Annis, who we covered in a Something Spooky a little bit ago, and you have La Llorona, who we covered in last episode.
Yes. Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm just it's interesting going
Krampus.
through what
Krampus. Evil Santa Claus.
Is he like a behave children thing?
I think so, because if you behave, Santa comes for you. If you don't, Krampus comes for you.
Oh, really?
I
I love how like all of these things have gotten watered down from this evil figure will kill you to you will get coal instead of a gift. We've really softened. So in a lot of the stories about her, they're a lot about how she's, practicing voodoo, but it's like kind of, I think, going off of these heightened stories about what it is. And one of them is that she had a pet snake named Zombie, which, I mean, maybe she had a pet snake, but that it's said that she went around saying that it was an African god reincarnated. And I don't know if this is a story that was blown up after the fact or if it was her trying to capitalize to the wealthy people who had no idea what was going on about it.
And when you say his name is Zombie, do you mean Zombie?
Drop the E. And yes.
Okay.
Also, I don't think there's any zombies at all involved in voodoo whatsoever, but for some reason, that's like an image a lot of people have with it.
Yeah, a lot of people do associate voodoo with, what is it called?
Zombies?
No. The magical art of raising the dead. Necromancy, yes. Yeah. Thank you for working out those Greek words with me.
I was like, no, it's not that one.
Like necroology?
No. What? I was worried you were going to say necrophilia, which is an entirely other thing.
No.
So the other thing, so we're kind of winding up about Marie a little bit. We're going to reach back and to see her legacy and stuff, but, which I mean, we're kind of covering at the moment. There's just a lot to say. Uh-huh. But, I wanted to note that while I was reading newspaper accounts at the time, unless they were like very much, everything is scary, this is terrifying, this is evil, we hate this. If they were people like who had actually like, written by people who had actually known her, like just strongly known of her, like by like very mutual connections and stuff, they were always like, no, she does not do voodoo. She is Catholic. She is so Catholic and she is so pious and she is so nice. And the thing is, they were just like, saying like they were really trying to distance her with the concept of like what voodoo is, but I think that, and these are newspapers of the time, because like you can be Catholic and practice voodoo at the same time. How do I phrase this? I think that they were saying like, oh no, she's good, she's not bad like voodoo is, when really voodoo is not bad, and that they were the media was part of this mechanism putting out false things about what voodoo is.
Right.
So like she could be, well, I mean, she is a slave owner, so like let's put that in there. Yeah. But in terms of how she was with people, at least as I read it reputedly, she could be like a very kind person, like going to these death row inmates and like doing these like Catholic rites with them and praying with them and helping them and seeking pardons for them and everything, which is something that she did do. But at the same time, she could be practicing voodoo, and these newspapers could not handle that these things could all be true at once.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, it was very interesting reading all the different accounts of her. Very varied opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go into a little bit about what voodoo is and what voodoo isn't.
Okay.
So I hear voodoo, and the thing is, honestly, what I was most, and I knew that there was more to the story for like sure, okay, I just also didn't know what it was because I hadn't looked into it before this really. But I would hear like voodoo dolls,
Right, yeah.
And I didn't do any extra research into what voodoo dolls were, other than I saw that it wasn't actually part of voodoo at all. And so just because I think it's like helpful to just say like what our impressions of voodoo dolls is, because we are talking about how this is a misconception. So I think voodoo doll, and I think, okay, this is a doll that is, for whatever reason, meant to represent another person. Perhaps you're taking a piece of their hair, perhaps a thing of their blood or something. And the idea is that the doll and this other person who is unaware that this doll exists have a connection, so that if you hurt this doll, if you like stick a pin in it, you are hurting that other person physically. Mm-hmm. Is that your impression of what voodoo dolls are as well? Okay, well, that has nothing to do with voodoo. It just like got the name onto it. I'm going to argue like kind of in a smear campaign type of thing.
Gotcha.
Really, what you're talking about when you're saying voodoo dolls is a European thing called a poppet.
Oh.
And I didn't do any extra research into poppets, but it would be interesting to go into to see if that's like exactly what it is, or if there's more to it. But that's a whole other thing. But I'm just saying it's not even voodoo. It's European, guys. Yeah. Come on. And so this is one thing I want to kind of what? Well, I saw a little thing in my notes. So, okay, this is the nerdiest thing I'm ever going to say to you, Zoe.
Okay.
I'm listening to a podcast called Game of Thrones 2 Electric Boogaloo, and it is where an academic who has studied Game of Thrones talks to other academics who have studied Game of Thrones, and they are all going and reading it and doing an episode chapter by chapter of the first book of A Song of Ice and Fire called A Game of Thrones. Okay, so in this, spoiler for Game of Thrones, in this one chapter, Daenerys, who is this relates. Daenerys, who is now part of this Dothraki horde, they have raided the city. She comes upon this woman who the Dothraki view as an evil witch. And in the commentary, in their podcast episode, they talk about a concept how if you in your culture believe something to be absolutely true, it is either considered science, or it is considered the absolute truth of your incredibly right and righteous religion. And everything outside of that belief system, no matter how similar the logic is to yours, is considered evil witchcraft. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what's happening with how, I'm going to say namely Christians, because we are talking about like the American perspective, view voodoo. Right. Okay, I'm getting back out of Game of Thrones. Okay. Do you see why I went there? Do you see why I went there?
I do. I do also think that you could have made the point without talking about...
I wanted to credit where I heard it. So, voodoo it's started its roots in African spirituality and belief systems that trace back like 6,000 years. And during the Atlantic slave trade, when people from West Africa were brought over to be slaves in Haiti, it really started mixing with Catholicism and more indigenous belief systems. And part of this reason was because Louis XIV in 1685 put out a rule that every slave who enters a French colony needs to, 1, be baptized Catholic, and 2, is not allowed to practice their original religion. Okay. And so what these people did in Haiti specifically, and then it spread outward, they would pretend that they were practicing Catholicism when really they were practicing their own religion. So voodoo is a religion where, and I'm just going to kind of explain it a little bit, there is a singular god, who I think they call Bonye, and this is it's a fairly distant god. So you cannot contact him yourself. They believe that you can contact these spirits called the Loa. Mm-hmm. And the Loa are how you can connect with God, and you can also contact your ancestors. So they believe like your ancestors are spirits as well. And so it kind of, in terms of hierarchy, it's kind of like you human, your ancestors, the Loa, and then God. Mm-hmm. So in the Loa in this way are very similar in the sense of like being between you and God to the Catholic idea of saints. And so they would say like, oh no, I'm not praying to the Loa Papa Legba. They would say, no, this is St. Peter. I'm praying to St. Peter.
I see.
Yes. But in this way of, being able to continue their own religion, it also blended these things together.
Right.
As it would inevitably do. So really voodoo today is this mixture of Catholicism, and I've seen like it's also a mixture of, Native American belief systems as well, though I didn't see it laid out how that is true, but I've seen it around, so I believe it. And then that African spirituality as well. So in Haiti, the reason it came over so heavily into New Orleans, where maybe it didn't spread to a lot of different places in the U.S. in the same way, is because Haiti, they had their revolution, which is, I believe, I don't actually know if this is true, maybe the single, real large-scale successful slave revolt, where they, became, I think the first Black republic who had been previously colonized. And I might be getting some things wrong there because I looked at an article that said it, but I didn't actually record everything that they said about it.
No, in my previous research, it said something very similar, because the Haitian Revolution is what caused a bunch of slave owners over in the United States to become a lot more strict and violent towards their slaves.
Yes, and that mindset affects how voodoo was treated once it came over, because there is a lot of folklore that the beginnings of the Haitian Revolution, when you had those specific leaders, that they performed a ritual to get help from the Loa in their start, so that when all of these slave owners from Haiti fled, bringing their slaves with them, many to New Orleans, they were very afraid of voodoo because they saw it as potentially the reason behind why that rebellion was successful. So now that they're all in Haiti and you have all of these enslaved people who do practice voodoo, and it is, spreading and becoming ingrained into certain segments of the culture there, they just were very against it. And when you're very against something, people will just shit talk it. They will shit talk it. And so that led to a lot of why they're saying voodoo is all of these, bad things, which I'm kind of gonna list here as being people think that voodoo is involved with cannibalism, zombies. I don't even know how that's comes into play. Black magic, public orgies, vampirism, love potions to make somebody be with you who doesn't want to be with you, killing someone, and that's all the things that Marie Laveau was notorious about just because she was a practitioner. But it actually wasn't that at all. In fact, there are some misconceptions because there are things about, for example, how Christians who, still make up a large portion of the U.S. and made up a huge portion of it at that time specifically as well, just because there's different ways to view things. So the way that they worship is through rituals of trying to attract the Loa, which, by the way, when voodoo really came over to New Orleans, they started calling the Loa instead spirits, or they would refer to it with the Creole word esprit. And so they would do things to attract the spirits to them with drumming and chanting and this dancing, because the idea is perhaps the spirit would then possess you, and then you are getting closer to God, and you are given wisdom, and you are able to tell people the wisdom that they are giving you. And really this was a very, very holy thing. But to Christians outside who were seeing this, who already had these misconceptions about what voodoo was, they were seeing this, and they were seeing this dancing and this possession. And in Christian culture, possession always has to do with the devil. You are never pleasantly possessed. It is never holy, which for them this is actually a very, very holy thing, and Christians could only really see they are communicating with the devil. This is witchcraft, this is bad, when really it's just two religions who were developed at very different times kind of coming together and not being able to line up or understand each other at all.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get into a little bit of the legacy of Marie Laveau beyond the grave, including her grave, actually. So this kind of goes back to the tomb. When she first died, there was a rumor that there was a voodoo spell that resurrected her. So this is the necromancy part of it. And people kind of kept saying, I see Marie Laveau. The day she died, everybody was like, I saw her. I saw her. She's around. And I kind of looked at this, and I was like, oh, she was Elvis. Because, everybody's like, Elvis was doing this. Elvis isn't dead. Like, you were not, like, Elvis was just so beloved that, like, you were not able to think that Elvis died. And so everybody was like, no, she's alive. She's around. She's around. So she was, like I said, buried in the St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Okay. There's more than one. Yeah. But she was buried in number 1. And it's actually a very interesting cemetery. Mark Twain called it the City of the Dead, because all these tombs are above ground, and it's almost like they're tiny, tiny little houses. So you're walking through them, and it's very maze-like because it's not very well organized, because it, just grows and grows, and it's sprawling.
Right.
And honestly, I desperately want to go. You cannot go by yourself, but you can go in a tour now. Okay. Part of the reason you can't go beside yourself is because of what I'm about to talk about.
The people marking her grave?
People marking her grave. I mean, it's not just hers, but hers is probably the one it happens most to. So there is a tradition that people do follow. Hopefully not so much anymore, just because things don't last forever. Physical things fade. So, like, don't do this. But people would say that, like, she could help you in the afterlife. So you go to her, you need help with something. You put an X on her grave. You spin around 3 times. You knock on her grave, you shout what you want, and you leave and you go about your life, and if it worked, you return, you find your X, the X you put on there, it cannot be another X, you circle it, and you leave her an offering out of things outside of the tomb. You have something to say.
It sounds like Build-A-Bear.
I'm sorry, what?
It sounds like Build-A-Bear when, like, you put the heart in the Build-A-Bear and they're like, now pump it full of love and spin around 3 times and kiss it. And now put it in the bear so the bear will love you.
What?
You never had to do that at Build-A-Bear?
I've never done a Build-A-Bear.
Oh, I have, like, so many. I got one for my birthday, like, every year from the age of 12 to, like, probably 18.
That's really cool. I wanted to Build-A-Bear. I never got a Build-A-Bear. But wait...
So there's this little red heart. I'm sorry, I'm distracting you.
No, do it. I want to know.
There's a little red heart, and when they're stuffing the bear, because when you pick, maybe you don't know, when you pick out
I don't know anything about Build-A-Bear, obviously.
When you pick out your bear, it's just the skin of it.
Yeah.
It's not pre-stuffed.
There's a skin of a bear?
It's the skin. And so,
with the fur.
With the fur.
Okay, thank God.
And then you bring it over to the stuffing machine, and they, like, put it on the pipe, and they stuff it full of stuffing. And they give you a heart to put into it, and they're like, you have to pump it full of love and give it a kiss, and you have to hop on 1 foot and spin 3 times, and, like, it depends on how embarrassed you are. The more embarrassed you are, the more stuff they make you do. And then you can put the heart, you put the heart to your heart, and then you put the heart into the Build-A-Bear, and then they stitch it up for you.
Okay, so I have things to say about this from a marketing perspective. That's genius, because the more time you spend, like, literally participating in the making of something, obviously the more attached you are to it. And if you're spinning around and kissing a heart and putting a heart to your own heart, oh my God, that's genius. And IKEA is genius in the exact same way, because you spend time making your furniture. You are emotionally attached to the furniture. Or if you're me, you give the furniture to Zoey, and then she makes the furniture for you.
Yes.
Thanks, Zoey.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you, but just the fact that cross the eggs, spin 3 times, yell something out loud, that just made me think of Build-A-Bear.
So if you Build-A-Bear her grave, she can help you, is the story.
Yeah.
So this isn't the only thing people do the tomb, and I really, really hate this next part. Somebody painted it pink. It's a white tomb. Somebody painted it pink.
Like, illegally. Like, it wasn't...
It was not legal. Somebody painted this tomb pink.
Why?
They're idiots. It was in 2013. It was with latex paint, which, okay, and I didn't know this before I Googled it, but apparently latex paint traps all the existing moisture. And so it was like, I think her tomb is made of plaster, and, like, that was just, like, gonna, like, hurt the tomb horribly.
Yeah,
and
humidity.
So they, like, got it off, but they pressure washed it, which is apparently, like, the worst way to get that off.
Oh.
And anyway, I'm just saying her tomb looks really worse for wear.
Oh.
It looks like really bad guys. And, like, that's the fault of the people who have been graffitiing it. Like, why would you paint it pink? Like, okay, I get the X's, honestly, I do.
Yeah.
But, like, the pink.
Like, I get the X's, not to the point where I would do it.
I wouldn't do it either.
No. That sounds incredibly disrespectful. And she's literally called the voodoo priestess. Mm-hmm. Why would you want to desecrate her grave in any way? Like, that just sounds like you're asking for a curse.
Which I don't think really happened here. But yes. So this is why people can't go to the tomb anymore. They can't even go into the cemetery without like a guide. So you have to have a guide now. But I do personally want to go to that cemetery just because, you know me, I actually feel, this is like I think the most spooky thing about me, that I just feel very comfortable in cemeteries. I would love to go.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So, and one woman, her name is Jackie. She said that she had like a disease and that she went and she did the offering thing and that, or the exes thing, and then she got cured and then she brought back an offering. So there is a track record, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Now, right now, voodoo is getting a lot more popular. People are practicing it a lot more right now. There's estimated to be about maybe 60 million people who practice it.
Oh, wow.
In the world total. And because of this, Marie is gaining like, people are like just really interested in Marie. Like, so like if you go to New Orleans and like you go into like a voodoo shop or something, her portrait's gonna be there. She is having a moment right now. She is everywhere. People like will say like currently that like they will have visions of her where she talks to them.
Oh.
Like she's really like a figure that people are like channeling a lot right now. And she has been there's like a million songs about her. There's a lot of pop culture about her. She is in everything. And if it would be a podcast unto its own that would actually be incredibly boring if I were to list all this out for you, but I'm not going to. But she was in American Horror Story Coven. I did hear that they kind of did like a hatch job about it. I haven't seen it. Okay. And this is how like Lalaurie comes in. She is apparently in that story associated with Madame Delphine Lalaurie, even though they did not know each other in real life.
I think totally different time.
When was Lalaurie around?
I don't remember.
All right. Well,
I was never good with dates.
Okay. Well, they didn't know each other. Okay. So it was just like, I guess American Horror Story was like, we're in New Orleans. These are two well-known women. We gotta do something about it. I don't know. Now, there are here's a smattering of ghosty bits. Okay. The smattering that's happening. She is seen walking in the French Quarter by her house on St. Anne Street. You can recognize her. Apparently, her ghost is seen in a red and white turban, and she wears bright colors. Again, remember, she had her hair down, so, like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
People will, if they see her, they're going to, like, follow her because it's, like, Marie Laveau. And when you're walking behind her, she will vanish, which is very spooky. There's a story of a couple staying in a house that was built on where Marie Laveau's used to be, and it seems like it was somewhat of an Airbnb situation for a while, or I don't know if that's exactly it. But anyway, people were staying there, and they were trying to get to sleep one night, and they said they heard chanting and drumming, and so the husband left the house. He was, like, looking around, trying to figure out, like, where it was coming from, came back to the house, and then was like, oh, it's coming from the living room. They left the house that night, and in the morning when they came back, there was a single feather on the floor in the living room. And apparently she was known to have feathers. Oh. She was known to have feathers. Another man was staying in that house, and he was taking a nap in the middle of the day, and he woke up to a ghost that was shrouded in shadow and glaring at him. Oh. I don't know if that was her or not. I mean, other people were there in the house. Not with him necessarily in that moment. Here is a 100% exaggerated ghost story that I just had to share. Lay it on me. I had to share. So this guy was in a drugstore, and a woman came in after him, and the guy who's selling things in the drugstore, the owner, he looks behind him at the woman and then, like, does a 180 turnaround to go to the back. And the guy's like, okay, that's weird. And then the woman looks at him, and she's like, do you know who I am? And he's like, no, I don't. And at that point, she slaps him, levitates out of the drugstore, and somehow goes to the cemetery. And somehow from his vantage point, he can tell that she is over Marie Laveau's tomb, at which point she disappears. And then the guy passes out, and then he wakes up, and the drugstore owner's like, hey, gives him some whiskey, and was like, that was Marie Laveau. And that is the single best ghost story that has ever happened. I feel like I just love that one. Yeah, the levitating. Who made that up? The gall to say, and then she levitated out of there to the cemetery.
That you could just tell she went above her grave.
You can tell.
Yes.
So here's some things about the her ghost in the cemetery itself. There's another tale that is, like, also patent. I don't know. I feel like this one is just made up because it was also like kind of told in the 30s, I think. And it was basically that this guy who was homeless was sleeping on top of one of the tombs, which I don't know if it's a normal practice. It also...
Like on the roof of it or like inside of it?
No, on the roof.
Okay.
They're like boxes.
Yeah.
And he said that like he woke up in the middle of the night and looked over at Marie Laveau's tomb, and there was like chanting, and there was like a circle, and there was like drumming and dancing, and that everybody was naked, and that she was in the middle with her snake zombie, and whose name was Zombie.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I think that is very clearly an exaggerated ghost story.
Yeah.
Had to let that one out too. There's also other stories. They say like she will be seen walking into her tomb. That seems pretty normal. They will say that if you are a person who does not respect her fact that she practices voodoo, you will feel pain in some way. You might be scratched, you might be pushed over. Also, if you are in front of her tomb and you are trying to talk with her, communicate with her or something, there's a few different things that can happen to you. One is that you just start feeling very bad, like physically. Okay. Another is that you will feel someone touching you. Creepy. And the other one is that you will hear someone talking from inside the tomb. Oh, imagine just this. I honestly think if I heard somebody talking inside the tomb, I would think it gets a buried alive situation, and I'd be like, authorities, this person needs out. This person needs out.
Unless it's like a really old tomb.
I feel...
Because it's above ground, and you can open them, and you can go in them. I wouldn't think it would be a buried alive situation.
Okay, here's the thing though, for me personally. Like, if I heard talking in a tomb and it was like an old tomb, obviously first thing is like ghost. But I think also if I had the smallest sense that somebody was somehow trapped in there, it would kill me later in life to have thought that I didn't do anything, in which case I would still have to be like, authorities! There's somebody in this tomb. So there's a couple other ghosts and in the cemetery, and I'm including them because their stories are funny.
Okay.
So there's this one guy named Henry Vignes who apparently was supposed to be buried in his family tomb there, and he entrusted somebody to take care of his affairs while he was out traveling. They sold the tomb for money. So he was not able to be buried there. He died, had to be buried in an unmarked grave. And so he is seen kind of going around the cemetery, and he'll be like trying to find his tomb. He'll be like, can you tell me like where this tomb is? And then sometimes if somebody's being buried, the story is that he will approach everybody who is crowding around watching this burial, and he'll be like, is there room for me in that tomb? Can I go there?
Oh no, sorry, that was just Gen Z.
There's apparently an EVP where he is saying, I need to rest. Oh. Poor guy. Yeah. Poor guy. And then here's a ghost I really love. And his name is Alphonse. And there is absolutely nobody has any idea who this guy is, which is my favorite type of ghost. Mm-hmm. And he will sometimes go up to you and hold your hand in the cemetery, and he will ask if you can like take him to where he lives or his home. He doesn't know like where he is. He's lost. Mm-hmm. I think this is an adult man, or at least he didn't say he was a boy. And then he will cry, and then he'll disappear, and that's very sad.
That's very sad.
There's a specific tomb for the Pinead family, Pinead.
Okay.
And he's apparently like really scared of it, but like he also he for whatever reason feels that people who go there will be hurt, and so he stands near it and says, hey, don't go there. Aww. Don't go there. I know. And then, and this is my favorite thing, he will be seen walking around, and if he sees flowers he likes on somebody's tomb, he will pick it up and put it on his own. I know.
That's great.
I know. You never hear about that. I'm like, that the sass. I don't know. I feel like it's a very sweet and sassy ghost.
The fact that like I've never heard that in a few of the other things just makes me feel like it's more real, you know?
Totally. This ghost is just picking up flowers from one and then putting it on another. I mean, like, what if that was just, like, a dude who was like, oh, I didn't bring flowers. Oopsie. I'm gonna, like, just completely disrespect his grave. Anyway, that is all the information I have for you, Zoey.
Wow. And just to go back and correct myself earlier for Madame Lalaurie, I did pull up the notes that I had for it. Yeah. She left New Orleans in 1832.
Oh, so they could have overlapped at some point.
Yes, because she was born in 1787 in New Orleans. So she was from 87 to...
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's probably a thing just because they were both well-known figures that they knew of each other, but there's no record that they, like, communicated.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to make sure I corrected myself before we got people saying, Well,
you don't know your own information, guys.
oh my god. No.
Oh my gosh.
Not that we've ever gotten anything.
We haven't gotten
well,
that.
except for the
Everybody's
Disney World thing.
Oh, which was a very nice comment
Yeah.
where we were just wrong about Disney World or Disneyland.
Yeah, I just like assumed that since we're on the East Coast and Disney World is on, or Disneyland is
See,
on,
we're getting it wrong again.
Disneyland is on the West Coast, that this one obviously came first, but apparently it did not because Walt Disney was in California.
You know, that makes sense. And we really do like whenever y'all reach out to us with corrections, which does happen sometimes. So guys, just keep them coming. Tell us how we're wrong and we will address it.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Robin.
Yeah, absolutely.
I learned something today, and I kind of concreted my opinion that I do like Marie Laveau.
Okay, all right. Well, everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, subscribe, review, tell a friendo, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/hauntedhospitality. For $3 a month, you can listen to a new episode from us. Zoe and I just started dancing rhythmically, and I got too into it. I forgot what I was saying. Zoe, your thing.
Yes, our Patreon episode comes out on the 13th because we're spooky.
Woo!
Also, if you want to see Robin's sources, you can head over to hauntedhospitality.wordpress.com. If you have your own spooky story, or maybe you've been to Marie Laveau's grave and you want to tell us a couple things, you can write to us at hauntedhospitalitypodcast@gmail.com that I am actively monitoring now.
Thanks, Zoe. And you can also DM us on the interwebs. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Haunted Hospitality. We're also on Twitter at Haunted Hosts. We hope to see you there.
Stay spooky.